I'll be reading from 2 Timothy 4, 6 through 8. 2 Timothy 4, 6 through 8. For I am now ready to be offered, and the time of my departure is at hand. I have fought a good fight. I have finished my course. I have kept the faith. Henceforth there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, shall give me at that day, and not to me only, but unto all them also that love his appearing.
Good morning. We appreciate so much the prayers that you guys are going to be giving out all week next week as we go to Pigeon Forge with the Liberty Lights. We are going to be living out, listen to Liberty Lights, those of you that are going, what is there, 25 of us? Don't forget that we're going to be there in the morning, be here in the morning at 6:45. Get here at 6:45, go ahead and eat your breakfast, and get here at 6:45, and then we'll have load the bus at that time. At 7 o'clock, we'll be pulling out. So we're pulling out at 7 o'clock and headed up that way. So everybody set your alarms. If you don't normally get up at 7, set your alarm to get up and say a prayer for the Liberty Lights as we hit the road. Now, you Liberty Lights, remember that luggage is an issue. We're going to have 25 people sitting on a 25-passenger bus. And that means that the luggage goes on the top, under the floor, and all that. So pack what, class? Light. Pack light. As light as you can pack. And I understand you got to have your makeup. You got to bring a whole bag for here's their clothes this big, and here's their makeup this big, and that's okay as long as we can get it on the bus. I recommend that no matter what, be sure you have. You can wear the same shirt a couple of times. You wear the same pants. Whatever you go down there, you can come back in the same pants. You can do that. We're not going to get dirty on that bus. Just be sure to have clean underwear. Make sure you got a bag for that. But we're going to have a good time, and we're looking forward to it. And we really, really, really appreciate the prayers of everybody as we go there and come back. You remember that we are on a lesson plan, and that lesson plan is to review through the Bible. We can't study every book, every chapter, every verse, but we're reviewing through the Bible. On Sunday morning, we're reviewing the New Testament. On Sunday night, we're reviewing the Old Testament. So be sure to come back tonight where we'll be looking at another portion of the Old Testament. But right now, we're in the New Testament, and we're going to look at the last letters of Paul. The transition, as it were, of Paul. Now, notice that we have not included Hebrews yet. A lot of people believe that Paul wrote Hebrews. Perhaps he did. But since I couldn't put it in a place and a time, then we're just going to look at Hebrews at a later part of our lesson plan. But this is the last. We've already looked at all of Paul's other letters, except for these three. And we are in a transition. Paul is in a transition. If you remember, Paul, the last time we got together, wrote his prison epistles. They are the letters that he wrote while he was in jail in Rome. Those 4 letters he wrote while he was here in Rome. He wrote a letter to the Philippians, thanking them for their great gift. He also wrote a letter to the Ephesians. He wrote a letter to the Colossians. Probably wrote a letter to the Laodiceans that we don't have. Perhaps that was a letter written to them, but he might have wrote other letters that we don't have. But he certainly wrote a letter to the Colossians, and then he wrote a letter to Mr. Philemon, who was a member of the church there at Colossae. So he wrote those 4 letters while he was in jail. He was actually under house arrest. He had means to be able to rent him a home, but he had the guard with him at all times. Well, he got out. Some people think that maybe he didn't get out. Things went sour for him at the trial, and then he got his head cut off. But I believe that he got out at this juncture. When he got out of prison, he went back to Philippi like he said he wanted to do. Remember when he wrote to the Philippians, he's going to send Timothy to you shortly, but I myself, I think it's going to go good in the trial. I'm going to see how well it goes, but if it goes good and I get set free, I myself will come to you shortly. And I believe he did. I believe he got out of Roman prison and he went to the Philippians, and there he visited with them for a little while. Then, when he left Philippi, he went over to Ephesus and he visited with them for a little while. They thought that they'd never see him again. Remember on his third missionary journey when he met them outside on this little island, the elders, he said, "I'll never see your face again." And they cried about that. But I believe he did get to see him again. That's good news. And he also visited the Laodiceans, and he visited the Colossians, Mr. Philemon. He saw him there. And he did that for about a year, floating around these areas that he's already visited, already established church. He did that for about a year. And then, after a year, he left and he went to Spain. And he spent 2 years in Spain. Now, he already told the Romans in the Roman letter that he wanted to do that. And I believe he did. There's historical writings. Clement is a writer that's close to the first century. He's in the second century, maybe second or third century. Clement wrote, Eusebius wrote, and Jerome wrote. And those writers indicate that he probably went to Spain and visited there for 2 years. And after 2 years, he come back. And when he come back to Ephesus, and he found some bad stuff going on. You remember when he was on that island, on that third missionary journey, and he told them, "I may never see you again, but let me tell you, elders, listen elders, be wary, what? Grievous wolves will come in among you, the eldership, and will lead many people astray." Well, by the time he got out of his 2-year visit in Spain and he went back to the elders, that happened. Those grievous wolves have come in. They were one specific, it's false doctrine. One specific group was called the Gnostics. That's a Hebrew word. It comes from the word gnosko. The word gnosko means to know. And these Gnostics thought they knew everything. And they said, "Oh, we know. You have to have a special knowledge given to you by the divinity of himself. And you can't go to heaven without this knowledge. We know it, you don't." So that was the concept. Plus, they thought that Jesus didn't come in the flesh. He come as a spirit. And that he didn't raise in the flesh. He raised in the spirit. And so they were lying about all that doctrine. And so Paul had to deal with that when he got to Ephesus. But Paul is now somewhere around 66 years old. Give or take a year or two. He's 66 years old. He's had a lot of experiences, established a lot of churches on his 3 missionary journeys. Now he's been out to Spain, no telling how many congregations he established there. He's a 66-year-old man, and he is going to leave Ephesus with all this bickering, with all this Gnosticism going on, with all this false teaching going on. He leaves and he goes on back to Macedonia, maybe Philippi, Thessalonica, maybe Berea, we don't know. But he's in Macedonia somewhere. But he leaves Timothy in Ephesus. Why? Because he is going to transition. I'm going, and I got to have somebody that's in place that can continue the work. I cannot leave this work undone. There's too much work to be done. But I'm going to make a transition. Now, a lot of people call these 3 letters that we're looking at today, 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus, they call them the pastoral epistles. If you're reading commentaries and you come across language that says, well, you know, in the pastoral epistles, they're talking about 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus. These are what they call the pastors. They are pastors, the shepherds that go around dealing with the issues of all the churches in the area. I'm not sure that they ever were pastors in the real term, sense of the word. Pastors are actually elders. Don't call me, a preacher, a pastor. That's not a true term. That's not a good term to call me. It's a good term, but it's a term to call the elders, the 5 elders that we have at Liberty. They are our pastors. So when you introduce me at a funeral and you say, hey, I want to introduce you to our preacher, that would be good. To our minister, that would be fine. But don't introduce me as your pastor, because I'm not your pastor. Those 5 elders are your pastors. But I get it. Sometimes they can't, people in the world, in the community, they understand what a pastor is. They think of the preacher when they think of pastor. So they're not, I get it. When I'm being introduced as your pastor, I understand what you're saying. They understand perfectly what you're saying. But in the real sense of the term, these are not necessarily pastors. These are ministers. These are evangelists. The word evangelist comes from the word euangelios. Got the word angel in it. These are messengers. And Paul is needing to transition. I'm a minister. I'm an evangelist, Paul says, but I'm 66 years old. And I don't know how much longer I'm going to live. I might live to be 97 like Gene Hester. You know, don't know. But things are looking rough. The soldiers are out to kill. I've been arrested. I've been whipped. I've been shipwrecked. I may not live much longer. I'm not going to be around much longer. I need to make a transition. So, Timothy, I'm going to leave you in Ephesus. With all that false doctrine going on, I'm going to go back to Macedonia. There's stuff for me to do. It's not that I'm quitting. It's not that I'm going to be in a rocking chair somewhere, Paul, and with my feet up and not doing anything and let y'all do all the work. No, I have plenty of work to do in Macedonia. But I'm leaving you with some work. So, in 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse number 3, here's what Paul said. As I besought thee, Timothy, to abide still at Ephesus. I wanted you to stay at Ephesus. I'm making a transition. I want you to stay at Ephesus. When I myself went to Macedonia, I had to go to Macedonia for some purpose. And so I got to do my work, but Timothy, you got to do your work. You can't stay with me all the time. There's got to be a transition. And so he says, here's why I left you there. That thou, Timothy, mightest charge, that means to command, some that they teach no other doctrine. There's a lot of false doctrine going on out there, Timothy, and you need to stand up and speak up and bold. Don't be arrogant. Don't be rude. Don't be crude, but say what you need to say. Boldly charge them. Tell them. That's false doctrine. That ain't right. Gnosticism is wrong. You need to get it right. In chapter number 2, he talks about the role of the women. The women were doing some things that was not appropriate in the church, and you need to deal with that. So Paul wrote about that. But then in chapter number 4, verse number 1, he says, now, Timothy, I want to tell you something. The Spirit speaks expressly. Expressly means clearly. 100%. Can't be denied. What? That in the latter times some shall depart from the faith. Now, we are in the latter times, folks. The latter times started in the Christian dispensation. There was the patriarchal dispensation when God spoke through the fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then there's the Mosaical dispensation when God dispensed His Word through Moses and the law of Moses. Now we're living in the last days, the Christian dispensation, when God dispensed His Word through His only begotten Son, Jesus Christ. And the Spirit speaks expressly. You cannot deny it. What? In these latter times, this time that we're living in, began all the way back in Paul's day, some shall depart from the faith, Timothy. They're going to give heed to seducing spirits. There's going to be false doctrine out there, and they're going to seduce them. You know what seduction is? To cause you to yield to what they want. And they're going to be doctrines of devils. These are something that the devil's behind. False doctrine. And they're going to be out there. And so, Timothy, I want you to be sure that during this transition of me doing my thing, you doing your ministry, I'm transitioning you. You can stand up and speak against this false doctrine that's going on. In chapter number 5, he deals with some widows because the widows were taking advantage of the church. They shouldn't have been doing. But then in chapter number 6, verse number 20, here's what Paul wrote to Timothy in his first letter. Oh, Timothy, Keep that which is committed to thy trust. You've been trusted with something. Keeping it means guard it. If you commit something to my trust, that means you gave me something for me to keep, for me to guard. So if I'm going to keep or guard something that's been committed to me, to my trust, I got to guard it. Well, Timothy, that's what you need to do. I'm transitioning, moving on to Macedonia and different other places. You've got work to do too. And I want you to guard what you've been committed to your trust. Avoid the profane and vain babblings. Lots of babbling going on. It's profane, it's worthless, it's demonic. And they're oppositions of science, falsely so called. Truth. They're not truth. They're opposing truth. And so he goes on to say, Timothy, I want you to make it better for those Ephesians there, as they're involved in so much and so wrong. Stand up. Be bold. Speak against it. It's out there, and it's going to be out there in the latter times. But Paul, being in Macedonia, wrote that letter to Ephesus, to Timothy at Ephesus. He leaves Macedonia, and he goes back to Ephesus for a brief visit. Perhaps even though there's a transition, and he's letting Timothy kind of take the leadership, he's still there to support him. He don't want to just abandon him. So he comes back for a brief visit to Ephesus, and of course he then moves from there and goes to the island of Crete. Now in the island of Crete is several congregations that's been established. Paul was there for a short period, right before they set sail off and got involved in a shipwreck and wound up on the island of Malta there. But he's in Crete now, and he stays there for a little bit of time, but he, just like he leaves Timothy in Ephesus to go to Macedonia, he leaves Crete, and he leaves Titus in Crete. We don't hear a lot from Titus too much, but Titus is as much a partner of Paul as Timothy was. Titus was very close to the Corinthians. He's mentioned a lot in the Corinthian letters. So he's got Titus with him there in Crete, and he's going to transition. Just like I transitioned Timothy to Ephesus, I'm going to transition Crete to Titus. So he leaves Titus in Crete, and he goes back to Ephesus because he's keeping an eye with Timothy. He loves the Ephesians. He loves the elders there. He doesn't abandon them. He just wants to be sure that there's a good transition in place. So he says, Titus, I'm leaving you, and I'm going to go back to Ephesus. And from Ephesus, we believe, he wrote the letter to Titus. Now here's what he's going to tell Titus. Virtually the same thing that he told Timothy. When he went to Macedonia and wrote back to Timothy, the transition of you watching out for the false doctrine, set up elders, because you know the elders need to be told what the qualifications are and so forth. They need to be strong, so you need to help them with that. He's going to tell Titus a lot of the same things, but he's going to do that from Ephesus. But he's also going to tell Titus something else. He's going to say, Titus, I want to go back to Rome. Got to visit Rome. And to get there, I'm going to go to this city here called Nicopolis. Nicopolis, if you find Corinth on the map in Greece, if you go to the north and over to the west, on that you can, there's probably maps in the back of your Bible, there's the city of Nicopolis. He said, now Titus, I'm going to go spend the winter in Nicopolis on my way to Rome. And I want you, Titus, to come and meet me in Nicopolis. Because even though I'm transitioning and I'm teaching you to take care of the church and establish those churches in Crete, I still want to meet with you, just like I met with Timothy. I'm going to meet with you. So I want you to meet me in Nicopolis, and maybe we'll spend the winter together there. Well, unfortunately, as he does go to Nicopolis, he gets arrested, Paul does, in Nicopolis. Probably doesn't stay the whole winter. He gets arrested, and he gets carried off to Rome. This time, he's not going to be in a house arrest where he can not come and go, but he can write letters, people can come and go. No. He's going to be in the deep, dark dungeon. He's going to be on death row. And so, he writes the letter to Titus to tell him, meet me in Nicopolis. Well, let's see how that all works out. Look at Titus chapter 1, verse number 5. He says, for this cause I left thee in Crete. What cause, Paul? Here it is. That thou shouldest set in order the things that are wanting. There's some things they need. There's some things they want. They're lacking. And you need to set them in transition. I'm moving on to other things. You got to do your work. They're in Crete. And set these things in order. And here's what I want you to do. Ordain elders in every city as I had appointed thee. I'm making a transition. This is your work. This is your ministry. I want you to fulfill your ministry. While I'm out doing what I need to be doing, Titus, Timothy, you need to do what you need to be doing. In chapter number 3, verse number 9. But be careful. You need to avoid, stay away from, foolish questions and genealogies. A lot of the Jews did that. Well, we can trace our lineage, our genealogy, all the way back to Abraham. We're the tribe of Benjamin. We're the tribe of this and that and Judah or something. Well, avoid all of those foolish questions. Avoid all of those genealogies. Just like I told Timothy, there's a lot of false doctrine going on. A lot of foolish questions, vain babblings. Well, you need to avoid all of that. Avoid the contentions. There's a lot of contention going on out there in the religious world. Avoid all of that. Avoid the strivings about the law. What law? The law of Moses. All kinds of, well, the law of Moses says this, the law of Moses says that. And we're under the law of Moses about circumcision and blooding and all these other things. So you need to just avoid the strivings about the law. Why? For they are unprofitable. They're worthless. They're vain. All they're trying to do is get a toe into the Christian church, the church of Christ, and they're trying to topple it. They're trying to pervert it. And so Timothy and Titus, while y'all are out there in Ephesus and all the cities of Crete, then y'all need to stay away from all that garbage and just preach the truth. Just tell them the truth, set things in order as I pointed you, and make sure everything is smooth. But avoid all that false doctrine. So, in verse 12 of chapter 3, when I send Artemas unto thee, or last week I called him Tychicus. Remember he went with Onesimus to deliver the letter to the Ephesians and the Colossians, but probably the CH is a hard sound, right, Don? A k. So you might pronounce that Tychicus. What he said. So I'm going to send you that fella because he's still on my radar. He's like Titus. He's like Timothy. He's like these other people that serve in the Christian church that I'm working with. So I'm going to send him. So here's what I want you to do when I send them. When I send them, be diligent, Titus. What? To come unto me to Nicopolis. Why? For I have determined there to winter. I've already made up my mind. I'm going to go to Nicopolis and I'm going to spend the winter there. And I want you to come to me and we're going to spend the winter together. And we're going to teach you one another and encourage one another through the winter. But unfortunately, he gets arrested. And when he gets arrested, he's carried off to Rome under that deep, dark dungeon. And at this point, he writes the letter to Timothy, the second letter. And he's in jail. In 2 Timothy, he asked Timothy to come unto him shortly. Timothy, get here quick. Perhaps Timothy is still in Ephesus doing his work. And he writes the letter and he says, Timothy, get to me quickly. Come to me shortly. Because I'm in jail. I'm on death row. This is not looking good for me. I knew when I was in jail the first time, I felt like I was going to get out and go visit the Philippians, which I believe he did. But now I'm not getting out. This is going to be a death to me. And I need you to come to me shortly. Everyone has left me. Only Luke is with me. Now Luke might have not have been with him when he got his head cut off. But he gets his head cut off by the Romans out of prison. Luke might not have been there. But he was maybe in the vicinity somewhere. But only Luke is with Demas. He left me. He forsaken me, having loved this present world. He didn't want to die. So he left, And then there's Titus. He is left. He went to Dalmatia. Now, Titus made it to him, but he made it to him in Rome, but he's not with him. He left. He went to Dalmatia, which is this area over here where Nicopolis is. So, not that he forsook him, it's just that he had work to do. Paul might have sent him to Dalmatia. Crescens left him. He went to Galatia. Carpus, he left him. Everybody's gone. I'm all by myself. Only Luke's with me, the one who wrote the Gospel of Luke and Acts. And he says, what I need you to do is come, but stop by Troas. And when you stop by Troas, I want you to get the books. Troas is a city right here on this shore. He said, when you leave Ephesus, go up here to Troas, get some books that are left at Carpus's house, and especially the parchments. Parchments are paper, special paper. Paul, I want to make this note, even though he was in jail, on death row, knowing he's going to get his head cut off soon, he still wants to read and he still wants to write. Young people, read and write all the time. Read the Bible, read commentaries, read all you can read, and write all kinds of literature, thank you notes, encouraging notes, notes to help people know what the Bible says. Reading and writing is so incredibly important to get the Word of God completely out there and encourage people. Always, you say, well, I hate to read. Well, find something that you would enjoy, but read, and write. Keep on doing that. It will encourage you. It will make your faith stronger. It will do something to you spiritually to just read and write. Paul was in jail about to die, and he said, bring me some books and bring me some paper, because I want to read and I want to write. So important to Paul to do that. So, in 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse number 8, he says, be not therefore ashamed of the testimony of our Lord. Timothy, don't quit. Don't quit. And don't be ashamed of me, Paul, his prisoner. See, Timothy says, oh, worry me. Paul's in jail. He's going to die. What about me? I'm out here in Ephesus doing all this Gnosticism stuff and fighting false doctrine, and they're going to despise my youth and all this stuff right here. Paul said, don't do that. Don't do that, but be a partaker of the afflictions of the gospel according to the power of God. Be willing to go to jail. Be willing to be whipped. I did it. I'm transitioning it. You're going to probably do it, Timothy. Be willing to be a partaker of those afflictions. He says in chapter 1, verse 12, for the which cause, these afflictions, I also suffer. And the gospel, for the cause of the gospel, I also suffer these things. Nevertheless, I am not ashamed. Don't you be ashamed. Don't you reject Christ. Don't you want to quit. I'm not ashamed, for I know whom I have believed. I'm 100% convicted of who I believe. He says, I am persuaded, totally persuaded. What? That he is able to keep that which I've committed unto him against that day. I've committed my soul to him. I've committed my trust to him. I've committed everything to him. And I know that he, Jesus, is able to keep it, to guard it against that day. When the judgment day comes, I know that he will take what I've given him, which is myself, my soul, and I will go to heaven. But foolish and unlearned questions, Timothy, avoid them. Get rid of them. Chapter 2, verse number 23. You know that they gender strife. You know that they don't have any value. You stay strong. Do not quit. And stay away from false doctrine. Stay away from the arguments. You need to get strong spiritually, and then you'll be willing to go to jail if you have to. You see, I am now ready. Chapter 4, verse 6, as was read in our hearing just a moment ago by Robert. I'm now ready to be off. I'm done. I'm out of here. And the time of my departure is at hand. It's not going to be 2 years. It's right now. It's at hand. It's going to happen. I have fought a good fight. I have finished my course, done what God asked me to do. I have kept the faith. I haven't quit, Paul says. I've been strong in the faith, even my 2-year tenure out in Spain. I did what I had to do. Henceforth, because I've done these things, there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness. A right crown. The right thing is laid up for me, which the Lord, the righteous judge, He's going to judge rightly. I can count on Him. What will He do? He's going to give me that crown at that day. And not to me only, but unto all them that love His appearing. Everybody that is looking forward to it, He's going to give it to him. And that has not forsaken Him. Paul not only is making the transition to his students, Titus and Timothy, for his mission work, he's making a transition from planet Earth to heaven. The question is, are we ready for that transition? It's going to happen. We cannot live on earth forever. Personally, I think that Paul died alone. It's my personal opinion. This is opinion. I think he was in jail. They served him, if he even ate. They don't feed you much. Soldiers came in. They looked at the docket. And they said, okay, Joe Smith, we're going to kill him. John Doe, we're going to kill him. Oh, yeah, there's this guy called Paul. We're going to kill him too. So they just go in. They get him out of jail. It's on the docket. They take him out. They cut his head off. And they put his body in wherever it wound up. Here's the point. Paul suffered all the way up, and he died alone. But it was not for naught. It was for the promotion of the gospel of Jesus Christ. This is God's plan to save man. And we cannot hold to this earth. We cannot say, well, I want this and I want that. It's okay to have things. It's okay that God has given us so many good blessings, and we're to use them wisely as good stewards. But if we hang on to them, and that is all that we live this life for, then what are you going to do at your transition time? Are you ready for the transition? Can I say, I am ready to go? Are you ready? If not, you can be by being baptized into Christ and living faithfully. So why don't you come? While together we stand and sing.